Hi, welcome to another episode of Cultivate. This is sort of a part 2 with Paul and I. We just did a great conversation about the Oasis project that Paul is doing. But for this episode, I just wanted to have just a heart-to-heart chat with the work that Paul and I do. A lot of you sometimes maybe are wondering, what exactly do the regional staff do? And what I'm finding, Paul, is that as regional staff, we're a little different. When I was going to the biennials and all the national conferences, American Baptists, I'd have conversations with other people in other regions, and I realized Evergreen is similar, but we're also kind of different in how we do things. And I thought today it'd be really nice to talk about the work that we do and how we come alongside churches, how we help churches. Because I think that's probably the biggest question when someone joins Evergreen or who is in Evergreen. They're like, so what do you guys do? Or what can we get from you? Or what's your purpose, right? So I thought maybe just to kick off, how do you see your role in Evergreen helping the churches that are a part of our family?
Yeah, so specifically my job within Evergreen is I'm the Associate Executive Minister of Operations and Administration. And so that means that, yes, I'm the guy in the office who answers the phone and receives the checks and opens the mail and handles our day-to-day operations. I like to say I'm the details guy because that's kind of my job, right? Is there's a bigger vision for Evergreen that's articulated by our board and by Pastor Doug, our executive minister. And then part of my job is to figure out how do we actually implement that? What are the specific steps that we need to take? Who do I need to interface with in order to make that stuff happen? But also part of my work is with churches, doing what I like to call administrative reviews, but helping churches take a look at how they're operating, at everything from their articles of incorporation and their bylaws to their budget to their employment contracts and their rental agreements, everything in between, and trying to kind of make sure that everything is lined up in the best possible way, that we're implementing best possible practices for these churches so that they aren't running into some of the problems that churches often run into, because churches often run on a sort of handshake sort of mentality, oh, you're doing something and we seem to be aligned in our values. Great, I'm going to shake your hand, you're going to rent the space from us. But having a formal rental agreement can actually be really important. It protects both the church and the organization that's renting space from the church, right? And so things like that, making sure that we get those lined up, that there are policies and procedures in place, because a lot of times churches have volunteers who have taken care of a particular thing forever, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, that person is unavailable, they get sick, they go on vacation, something even more unfortunate happens, and then all of a sudden it's well, wait, how do we do this thing that is absolutely necessary for our operation that was always handled by this one person? Right. Implementing those policies and procedures, those guidelines and those best practices, it's not exciting work for some people. I really enjoy it, but I like to say I help churches do the boring stuff well so they can do ministry better.
Right, and well, I guess I'll just say very quickly, the work that I do is, some churches just they're stuck with a problem. They're entrenched in something. They need a different mindset. They're trying to figure out how can we strategize, create something to respond to our problem, whatever it may be. It could be a systemic thing, could be a relational thing, it could be an admin thing. But I'm kind of the first stop of okay, let's design a plan. Now, it could be, and why I wanted to just bring that, because, our roles are interesting in that they really do intertwine a lot. So, for example, a church could come to me and say, hey, we're stuck on this, and we think we have problem X. And so, okay, let's look at it. And so as we're kind of figuring out a design strategy to address that problem X, it turns out this isn't actually an operation problem, right? And then at that point, I could say, well, actually, we have someone who really knows operations of churches, the things you need to know. I can refer them to you. They could do work with me in parallel, or they could just be offloaded to you. Or it could be something that maybe Doug is hey, this is development thing. This is like conflict mediation thing. And, maybe it can be offloaded to different staff members, or like, hey, actually, you just need to do your social media better. So like, we just talk the show on. So I like our approach in that, we can start with any of the staff, but eventually, like, we're really about teamwork and just helping people where they're at. And why I want to just kind of highlight this, because I grew up in several different traditions, right? Like much more top down. So like in the Korean church, it's very much more hierarchical. I was in the Methodist church for a long season. So, you've got the bishop, and then you got your district superintendents who tell you what to do. So I'm very familiar with a lot of ecclesial traditions. I've been in non-denominational churches. What I've usually understood regional staff to be is like they're at the top. We're accountable to them. They tell us what to do, and we try and fall in line. Like the Methodists literally have a book of disciplines, right? But when I became American Baptist, I realized like that's flipped, right? Like the regional staff are at the bottom. And I was just wondering, what's your take on like how regional staff serve the local churches compared to that model I just described to you, the top down?
Sure. One of the core Baptist freedoms is church freedom, right? And this is built on the concept of local church autonomy, right? Every Baptist congregation is assumed to have already in it everything that is needed to be the church, which means that every association at a level, quote unquote, higher, right, but regional, denominational, those are completely voluntary. And so one of the things that I think is really interesting about regional staff work within the American Baptist churches in general and within Evergreen in particular is that we are actually here to serve the churches, and specifically to serve the churches in the ways that they need it, not that we're coming in and saying, oh, you have to do things this way. One of the things that can be challenging about an administrative review is I do this work, I spend weeks and months, reading documents, interviewing people, putting things together, and then I turn over that administrative report, and that's all I can do.
Right.
I've got a series of suggestions, usually 2 or 3 short-term suggestions and 2 or 3 long-term suggestions for how that church could approach some of the things that come next. And it's based on that something of an outsider, something of an insider perspective that I have being on regional staff. But ultimately, if the church chooses to do none of it, there's literally nothing that I can do about it.
Right. And I think that was the big switch for me, because I feel like for us, we're actually just resources in the end, right?
Absolutely.
It's like, it's a resource that you can choose to use or not, right? And, there is no implication at all that anything that we suggest must be done. And there's nothing that we will do to enforce it. We can check in, like we care about you as people. Like that's why we're offering you resources. And that's it. There's no strings attached, which was really different, because I remember being in another denomination that, there was this conflict, and, the regional authority comes in, they mediate, they say, this is what you're going to do. They say, like, this is the pastor that's coming. They're very, like, prescriptive, and it was a real mind switch. Now, what do you feel are some of the positives and negatives? Because like I think it's good to be balanced about this. Like this idea of us being just empowering resources, right? With no expectation that you have to follow us. What are some of the positives or negatives to this kind of approach?
One of the things that I think is true, and this falls, I think, in the negative column, is that because churches don't have to use us, very often they don't. Right. They don't take advantage of the resources that are available to them. And Evergreen is a growing region. We currently have 68 churches in Evergreen.
Oh, 68 now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just a couple of years ago, we were at like 62, 63, right? Right, yeah. And we've had a church or 2 close in the meantime, but we've had more join us than have closed. So we're a growing region. So to some degree, it would be challenging if all of our churches all at once said we all want the same resources. That said, there is still resources that we have that I think churches don't take advantage of, or worse, wait too long to take advantage of. One of the things that I really appreciate, being the guy who answers the phone, as someone reminded me, I'm the voice of Evergreen, because it's literally my voice that you hear when you first call in to figure out who you're going to talk to. And then also I'm the one who's in the office most often, the one most likely to actually answer the phone. But one of the things that I feel kind of privileged in is that I get to work with whoever's calling in and I help identify and really work with them on what is the actual issue that you're having, and then who in the staff can best help you. And sometimes that's an individual. Oh, we're having this conflict. Great. Doug is sort of our first person to go to for conflict mediation. But often it actually ends up being a combination of us working together that really helps resource a church through a particularly trying issue. That, I think, is actually a really exciting part of my job. I never have the same day twice.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I really resonate with that sometimes it is hard because, both of us and Doug, like we all have pastoral experience, right? Like we've also pastored churches, we've done a lot. And sometimes, we don't want to be belligerent for sure. Like we don't want to impose ourselves, but, we have seen this story before in other churches. So when we give our advice, it's not like it's unfounded. And so when people don't take it, and then it ends up doing exactly what we were warning them about. It's hard sometimes to watch, isn't it? I mean, that is the negative thing of like, we just have to trust. Like I think our work is just trusting that God is going to work with you folks, whatever you choose. We just have to do our part, which I think is a positive, negative thing. Sure. It's like, it does teach us a lot of trust. It is hard when we see that. But what is exciting is also that trust can also lead to these amazing surprises. We were just talking about like the Oasis Project. We've seen in some churches too. There's like, I've also had moments where like, oh, I didn't see that coming. Like, that's really cool. Like, I'm learning from you. And I love going to churches and like, tell me more about your church. Like, I want to learn. Right. And it's exciting when it's like a partnership, when I'm not going in there to enforce myself, enforce like what I said, but I'm here to discover and learn and adjust. It just creates a lot more of a healthy environment, I think, between the region and the churches. I see God at work there. I also change and transform. I think that's it at its best for me. Yeah.
One of the things that I actually really appreciate is that Evergreen has chosen to heavily invest in its staff. Yeah. We have 3 full-time staff members and 1 part-time staff member. That's actually a lot more than other regions. Right. And that was an intentional choice that our board and our personnel committee made to make sure that we were resourcing our congregations in the best way. One of the things that I think is really important about that congregational model and about the way that we work with people is how that can transform things. Part of us resourcing in this way is that we don't have to be prescriptive. We can be very individualistic in our approach. We can say, oh, this church has its own unique needs. Even if it might be on a trajectory that we've seen before, we can say, oh, this church is still its own unique space. Right. We don't need to come in and say, you want to grow your church? Here's how you do it. We can say, actually, how does development look for your congregation in its specific context? And we can really engage with that.
Yeah, and we don't compare them to other churches. We have no like bar of expectation or deliverables. Yeah.
And rather than assuming that we know what's going to be best for the churches, we've implemented this model of listening to the churches and then letting them dictate what are the things that they're concerned about or excited about or that they want to pursue, so that every other year we're kind of renewing our options for what are the things that we're trying to resource our churches in and with, right? Yeah. And this is where that cohort model that we've come up with really matters. And so the leadership retreat in February identified several different themes. Kind of prominent among them was this idea of reimagining church in different ways. And that is now the theme of our annual meeting. And it's also shaping the cohorts that are coming out of that, which should be very soon, if not by the time this episode actually goes live, already be active. And those cohorts are spaces where I think I've seen the most sort of transformational things come out of. Churches that have honestly engaged in the cohorts have developed new models of ministry and new ways of connecting with their communities, and then found excitement and revitalization in doing that. Yeah. And that's something that we couldn't do if we hadn't invested as heavily in staff as we have, and then also if we were trying to do that more top-down model.
Yeah, and I think it's showing in the results in terms of like considering the size of our region and the percentage of representation at our annual meetings and our leadership retreat is very high compared to most places, right? Most regions.
We usually have 60 plus people at most of our events, which for a 68 church region is pretty darn healthy. And then usually half of our churches are represented. And not to name names, but I know regional staff who would bury bodies if they could get half their churches to show up to something.
Right, and there's like a spillover effect to even the national conferences. I've found that the Evergreen presence is really strong. Like there's something in our culture in Evergreen that we genuinely enjoy the company of each other. And we do like to engage with each other, which unfortunately is not normal in some spaces. Like we really do take advantage of the opportunity to share resources, to collaborate, to engage with each other. Usually when I meet a new Evergreen church, they're like, whoa, what is this? What have we stepped into?
It's a really different space. I mean, I often tell people, like, you really want to understand what Evergreen is? Come to our leadership retreat, come to our biennial gathering, right? Come to an Evergreen event, because there is a vibe that cannot really be put into words. Right. There is an experience that you will have being part of it.
Yeah, and I was just talking to Alan before the recording. I was saying, like, a lot of why I'm trying to do all these episodes and stuff is like I'm trying to communicate more what this Evergreen vibe is, right? Because it's hard to describe. And, if you go through these episodes, if you come to our events, you begin to get a sense of it. And it's really exciting. I think I was doing a lot of work in the city, and there was a survey that was going out. And one of the big takeaways from this big survey to all these ministry leaders was like, we don't want more work to do in ministry, right? We have enough to do, but we want to do the work with people, right? We want support doing the work we're already doing. And I think that really spoke to like, that's why Evergreen seems to be having this momentum it has, because I think if you're in Evergreen, you're not alone, and we're all in this together, and there are people to help you, not just the regional staff, like other churches too. And I think that's a really special thing, and it's really cool to be a part of.
And that idea of voluntary association that I talked to at the beginning, I think Evergreen in a lot of ways really represents the best of what that can be, right? Yeah. Here we have churches that are coming alongside each other. Oh, this is what you're going through? We're going through the same thing. Maybe we can work together. Oh, you did this a few years ago? We're interested in doing something else. Rather than us figuring out how to do it all from scratch on our own, what if we just cribbed your notes, right? I mean, whatever it might be. Oh, you guys went through a name change process? What was your process? How did that work? What was good about it? What was bad? Right. And because our churches talk to one another as much as they talk to the office, there really is that sense of like a collaborative community that's really engaged. And we're at the office, we're always glad to step in and help make those connections, because sometimes churches, particularly newer churches to our region, don't know Well, who's already doing this kind of thing? Who's already doing that? I mean, one of the things that I am a firm believer in is like, you want to do policies and procedures. That's my wheelhouse. Please do not start from scratch. Here, let me hand you policies and procedures that I think are already well written. That's a really good way to get started. You can fine tune them to your particular church, your particular context.
Yeah, and you know what's really exciting is that although, technically I guess 68 churches is small, but in terms of like within those churches that we're talking about, we have incredible resources, like very gifted people. When I first started Evergreen, I was trying to kind of create a system of consultants outside of Evergreen so that people could like access like these great minds and the great wisdom of people outside. But the more work I did with Evergreen, I was realizing there's so much wisdom within our own community. And a lot of what birthed the cohort between you and I was like, oh, we need to connect people to the wisdom within. Because, at every leadership retreat, someone stands up, says something. I'm like, wow, we have a lot of good people here. I love that. And it really kind of alleviates the pressure from the staff. It's like, we don't have to have all the answers. Because if we don't, there's definitely people in our community that can help us. That's really exciting for me about Evergreen. Gosh, we sound like such fanboys, right? I guess we work there, right? So this feels a bit like, humble brag or something.
Sure. One of the things about the Oasis, I know that's going back to the last episode a little bit, but one of the things about the Oasis that we sometimes comment on as staff is like, even if I didn't work here, I'd probably be here, right? I think that's very true for me of Evergreen, right? Like, even if I didn't work here, this is still the space I'd want to be in, right? Because
that's a good sign.
It's such a different kind of space. Yeah. And because I really do believe that, it makes doing the work exciting, easy. Even when it's hard, you remember that there's this bigger picture, So the hard days, sure, they're still hard. And going through the difficult moments with churches, which sometimes churches go through, and you're there to walk with them in it, those can be difficult too. Yeah. But there's also these moments of sort of almost transfigurative connection and joy and these other things that sort of sustain you through those challenging times.
Yeah, it's a special place when you're in somewhere where you can really like believe in and you can identify with, isn't it? Yeah, and I'm hoping that for all of our listeners and our viewers is that, whatever you're doing, like, make sure that you're in a space that you can believe in and that you can identify with. Yeah, well, Paul, I always say this often to you, like, I really enjoy working with you. I'm really grateful for you and the staff, and it's been wild. I guess we've both been there about 4 years, and some change, and even in those 4 years, it's really exciting to see how things have evolved and changed, and we're continuing to do the work. So very grateful for you, and thanks for being my guest on 2 episodes with awesome conversation, and looking forward to more.
Yeah, I'm certainly glad to do it. And, Sam, I really do like working with you too. Although, one of the things I'll say is I'll give you the $20 for that particular ad for me later off camera. Yeah.
Yeah, this feels like a very self-serving episode, doesn't it?
Maybe a little.
I don't know how many views we're gonna get on this one. People are like, "Oh, this is too much." They're having like a bromance on there, and they're talking about their stuff. Like, stop. Okay. So, anyways. Thank you, my friend. Thank you for joining us on this episode and getting through to the end with all our mushy talk. Anyways, see you next time.